Hello and welcome to Zooming In on Hate. My name is Jordi Nijnhuis and today we've got a very special episode for you because we will be talking about AI for good, addressing hate speech with AI-powered tooling. Now, as opposed to us interviewing one expert, you'll be listening to 5 different experts chatting in a webinar today. This webinar was hosted under the European Observatory of Online Hate by our dear friends at the Violence Prevention Network. And it looked into the way experts are using AI tooling to counter or push back on hate. Because when hate and AI are talked about in the same sentence, experts often point to the proliferation of harmful content. But AI is a tool and can also be used to support efforts to fight back against hate. Specifically, LLM tooling employing classifiers of language can give key insight into emerging trends and even support work to report illegal hate. So this online event brought together experts from the European Observatory of Online Hate and other organizations using cutting-edge AI tools in their daily work. We had a conversation about how technology is supporting civil society's responses to hate under the DSA, but also what key insights are already there and how AI complements rather than replaces human expertise in identifying and addressing harmful content. So let's tune in to Rebecca Visser from VPN, who moderated this important conversation.
I am Rebecca Visser, and I'm pleased to be joined by 2 of my consortium partners from Dare to be Grey, specifically Jordi Nijnhuis and Laura Bucher, as well as 2 representatives from the Neu-Ulm University of Applied Sciences, I should say, specifically Dr. Martin Riesus and Niels Rijkers, as well as Adinda Schroel from the INACH team, where she's the head of research, advocacy, training, and development at the Secretariat there. What we have joining us today is a wealth of expertise, and I don't want to hold it up any longer. So what I'll do is I'll pass over first to our colleagues from Dare to be Grey, who can introduce a little bit about what the EOOH dashboard is. So what we're going to do is each participant group will introduce their work, and then after that we'll move to moderated discussion where I'll pose a couple questions and then we'll go to the Q&A. So with that, I'll just first pass over to Laura and Jordi, who can please take it away on discussing their work.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Very, very pleased to be here with this pretty big group of experts. I will introduce myself. I'm Laura Bucher. I'm a research officer at Dare to be Grey. And as Rebecca mentioned, I'm part of the EOOH team. What I do within the EOOH team is I manage the newsroom of the project. So we use the data from the EOOH monitoring dashboard, and we translate data that reflects online harms on social media platforms to articles, reports that can be useful for the stakeholders. So I'm sure many of you are. And we conduct research around online hate trends. So the idea is that we try to make data inform content that can inform professionals in the field. I will pass it over to Jordi.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Jordi Nijnhuis, and apologies for my voice. I haven't been partying yesterday, it's just a cold, but I'm trying to power through today. So I'm the director of Dare to be Grey, and as an organization, we are interested in creating a better understanding of and better interventions to issues such as radicalization, polarization, disinformation, hate speech. And, obviously the online world is a big factor in this. So we've been working with technology to help us to create a better understanding, but also more targeted interventions. So I'm very happy to have a conversation about how these tools, work and have been operationalized in our work.
And I'll jump in the next. I'm Martin Rieses. I'm Professor for Digital Society and Online Engagement, and at the Neu-Ulm University of Applied Sciences, I lead a team of about 10 research assistants in the field of information systems, where we address online trust and safety issues. We cover a range of topics. Hate speech is a major focus of ours, but we're also dealing with topics regarding online extremism, doxing, information warfare, shadow banning, so different questions of content moderation, etc. And as the University of Applied Sciences, we're also not just trying to restrict ourselves to pure academic research, but also trying to develop tools, and predominantly AI-based tools, to deal with these issues. So that being said, I'll hand over to Niels, and in case, because he'll introduce one of the tools that he developed for us. And we're always keen to hear your feedback, and please be in touch.
Yeah. So hello from my side. Thanks for the invitation and also for the introduction. As Martin has already been said, I'm pursuing my PhD at HNU under his supervision, and I will use this opportunity to present you in the next 3 minutes our project or system called Maxplain. So I will just jump right into the tool, and I will explain you what the tool is doing by delivering you an example. So I will select here a random hateful meme from a research data set and start the agent inference. So Maxplain is a tool that is a configurable multi-agent system for content analysis and decision-making support with a focus on hate speech. And it works with text and images, and in the future, hopefully also like with video and audio. And you can use it like for multiple different scenarios. And in this case, what it does is it is configured to evaluate whether the provided content constitutes a violation of specific sections of the German criminal law. And so I do have here like different defined agents. So it's a multi-agent system, different from, for example, ChatGPT, where you just have like one agent that you're talking with. So they all take different roles and discuss and collaborate to decide whether this input is prohibited by German criminal law court. And for example, that's a very nice to understand agent. Here's a prosecutor agent. It's delivers arguments for a violation of the German criminal law. And on the counterpart, there's a defense agent, which delivers counter arguments based on the prosecutor's claims. And at the final layer, there's a judge, which does a final, who's doing like a final assessment and checking whether the predefined paragraphs here are violating the German criminal law code. And there are like multiple other features. For example, you can also like chat with the agents directly. And there's like a shared rule book where you can also add like different paragraphs from the German criminal law code. And it's like highly flexible, modular. And yeah, we have already shown that this tool is, or like this multi-agent setting delivers a better performance of classification content right. And now we are trying to prove our claim that this system also is good for explainability, so that it is doing the whole decision-making process more transparent than other methods. And we are like highly interested in getting in touch with persons who want to test the system or are interested in collaborating. So I prepared like a little form here on the website called maxplain.com. It's written like this. And you can just submit us here a message if you are interested in booking a demo. Of course, like everything free of charge. We don't have like any financial interests. Or if you want to give us like feedback, or if you want to participate in our study that we are doing. And I'm looking forward for the rest of the discussion.
I think I'm last to introduce myself. My name is Adinda Schoro. I work for INACH, International Network Against Cyber Hate. We are a network of about 36 organizations by now from 26 countries, and all our members work in the field of online hate speech. Some of them work only on one type of hate speech, others on hate speech in general. And as the INACH Secretariat, we, on one hand, manage events for our members, and on the other hand, we obviously stay on top of any developments within the field, whether that's policy or research, etc. So I guess in that role, mostly we're using AI tools to do research.
Sorry. Great. Thank you all for briefly introducing your work there. And what we wanted to do by just having each of the panelists introduce their work in their own words was to just give you a little bit of a taster of the different ways that AI-powered tooling interacts with their work, or that how they have tried to develop it as tools fit for purpose for civil society and other stakeholders in addressing hate specifically. So with that brief introduction, I then want to go to pose some deeper questions to all of the panelists about how AI-powered tooling helps support their work to address hate speech. So I'd love it if the panelists could touch on how it might help yourself or other stakeholders understand the scale and patterns of online hate and communicate them well to relevant stakeholders, but then also what the strengths and current limitations are, as well as important areas to safeguard are in the AI systems that you're interacting with in your work. So I might, in this case, pass first to Jordi, so he can pick what he wants out of there, and then we can go around a bit there.
Sure, thanks. So Dare to Be Grey has been involved with the European Observatory for over 4 years now, I think. So that's quite a privileged position to be in, because we helped shape the dashboard, and it's the main tooling we use currently. What's really beneficial for using that tool is that it can analyze data at scale. So in the month of December, I think, we had about 14 million posts or pieces of content that had been analyzed through the dashboard. So you can really look at the current landscape at scale, but then also it provides the opportunity to zoom in. So you can put in your own keywords. So for example, if I would be interested in looking at conversations around a town I live nearby, I would put in Rotterdam, and then it will surface content from the city of Rotterdam in Dutch, in English, in whatever language you wanted to find. And it works cross-platform. So you don't have to spend hours and hours on Twitter or X these days to look at conversations around Rotterdam. No, you can just plop it in the dashboard, let it do its thing, and then come back a week later, and it will just surface you content from all those different platforms. So the skill is very nice, but also the ability to look across platform is fantastic for us, and we're using that in a variety of ways. So I'm sure Laura will follow up with some more specific case studies, because she has been mainly responsible for most of the research on our side. But it opens up a space for us to look critically at those digital spaces and see what kind of societal harm can emerge from there. So one of the things we did is looking at the impact of a change in content moderation on Meta's side when they announced in January that the policy would change. Falling in line with some political actors in the United States, perhaps. But we did measure that sexism on Meta platforms, so Facebook and Instagram, increased by about 20% after the change in policy. So that's quite fundamental, I would say, because it shows that the entirety of a platform can just increase in toxicity or become more hateful with the click of a button. Because their overlord Mark Zuckerberg decided that this is the way to go, right? So I think that's a very strong argument that it can also be the other way around, right? If we put more effort in advocating for better digital spaces or safer digital spaces, they can also turn that button the other way around, and then it becomes a bit more healthy, a bit more positive. So that's one example I would like to highlight. Another one is with breaking news events. So we had riots surrounding a football match in Amsterdam recently or last year between Ajax Amsterdam and Maccabi Tel Aviv. They were easily dubbed as anti-Semitic riots, but that's not really a very nuanced frame because in reality the picture is way more complicated. I don't have time to go too much in detail, so read that research on our website. But that also helped us to see how online spaces can become hijacked to frame certain issues, and then that becomes the dominant frame. And again, this is next to impossible to do it with limited resources or with a small team in a very short time frame. But because we had that analysis ready in a week or so, as opposed to I know, like the national government still, scrambling for insights and information. So if we really want to do something about these online spaces, I think we need to move on beyond tracking things in Excel sheets, which is cute and nice, but we're facing multi-billion organizations based in Silicon Valley. So I think we also need to get our house in order as civil society and embrace these tools, because otherwise we will lose.
I think that's a really potent set of examples, and then also I love the way that you answered the question of what problem this is helps you address as well, like what problem this might solve. So would actually love to invite the other panelists to further reflect on that. So Laura, did you want to come in with more case studies now, or should we go around a bit and
Everything is fine for me. Maybe I can follow up a bit on what Jordi said. I think to respond to your original question, Rebecca, of the role of AI in addressing online hate, I think this has been really Dare to Be Grey mission from the beginning, and without that, it wouldn't have been possible to scrape, as Jordi said, a huge amount of messages only with humans and Excel sheets. And I think what Dashboard is very good at, for example, is dividing online hate speech into the different categories in which online hate is most prevalent to. So, for example, we analyze discourse on sexism, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hate. So thanks to the algorithm that the dashboard provides, we're able to narrow down research and really analyze more in depth specific important topics. Maybe to respond to your second questions on the limitations, something that I thought of to share is, for example, that English is definitely the most prevalent language on the internet, which brings the limitations of different other languages other than English being slightly less there. So the variety and the of the data we can gain from English is definitely higher. So sometimes languages cannot be really compared because of this overall problem. So that's something maybe I wanted to share. And other than that, we've, for example, noticed in our dashboard that Roma community data is lower than, for example, data we have over sexism, because we know that these communities, maybe the silent minority community through which we are unfortunately unable to gain as much as data as other communities. So I think these differences are important to take into account when facing data online. And of course, tech works better when data is most prevalent. But I can go further into details on our research maybe later on.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to pass, I think, first to Adinda, and then I'll pass to you, Nils, and maybe you can speak about, because you come from a slightly different background, we're civil society on the other side of the panel, but you can also speak from a technical perspective about what problem you're trying to solve to support people addressing hate speech. But first, Adinda, I'd love to also just to draw you in, following up on the points of Jordi and Laura about how it might be supporting your work, and then also what limitations there might be as well.
Sure, thanks. I guess I would have two examples on how we're using AI tools. We have our own cyber hate neutralization hub, which in essence is an AI tool that detects online toxic bot content on TikTok, and then maps out for us the basically the online hate narratives that the bots try to influence. So far, we have a version of that in English, but we're currently also working on a version in Dutch, because one of the limitations of the English version was actually that we were drawing in a very broad area of language, and it made it much more difficult to actually determine where the bots were focusing on, because in English it basically entailed any kind of conflict or political issue out there, which made it too broad. But we definitely think that with a Dutch version, with a smaller language, it's going to be much more interesting to follow online hate narratives, especially this year with the municipality elections in March. I guess it helps us to show that often we talk about online hate and why people are so hateful. But with our hub, we can also prove that actually a large amount of the online hate that is out there is not produced by people. So it's not necessarily people that are hateful. It is actually more a problem of political actors that are paying for bot armies to influence the online debates and the public debate, in essence, in society. So it's the problem is maybe much more multi-layered than we often assume. So it's not only a matter of trying to teach people not to be hateful. It's definitely also a matter of countering very professional efforts to influence us. So that will be one example. The other example is that we use also the EOOH dashboard for online monitoring. We participate in the monitoring exercise that is annually organized by the European Commission to check the platform's behavior in the moderation of content. So obviously, as an understaffed NGO, a small NGO, it saves us a lot of work that we have the technology to help us with the monitoring. It's obviously a combination. We have to check everything, but that the data is already there to check is a huge step forward for us. But maybe one limitation in general, also, I would say that, for example, with our hub, we only use the data from TikTok because of issues on getting access to the data. So not all of the data is just as accessible for research and analysis. So that's definitely a limitation, I would say.
Thank you for reflecting on that. I think that's super interesting. And I think someone who would know limitations on data access better than anyone would be some of our information scientists in the room. So maybe I'll pass over to them and they can speak further on the systems they're working with and strengths and limitations there and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, thanks for handing the ball over. So in general, we do have like a little different perspectives, or because we have like this research-driven perspective. So our goal, or more specific, the goal of my thesis is about to develop and evaluating the AI-based methods for hate speech detection. So in general, it is more about others that can benefit from our research. So our potential user groups or target groups are like NGOs, public institutions, and a little bit also like the platform operators itself. But they usually have they do have their own already existing solutions that are behind a big black box. So the focus from our research is not on replacing the humans, but instead on supporting their work. So also like a contrast to the EOOH dashboard, our tool is less about analyzing data at scale. It's more about providing support in the decision-making process of like specific content samples. And yeah, in general, AI can help to quantify the scale of hate speech, because online you do have like this vast volume of existing content, and AI can help to detect temporal and thematic patterns, and also, as we have been seen, to deliver like structured explanations. And yeah, so in general, the most stakeholders in the real world don't not just only need like a binary label, so just not only like a decision made whether there's hate or no hate, but instead they need like more explainability, more transparency, more yeah, reasoning. And yeah, I also do see like a lot of technical limitations, as already has been mentioned. So there's this low resource language aspect, because usually the vast majority of AI models, so you can say there that the more data was used during the training phase, the better the generalization and the model capabilities are. And for low resource languages, we can see that the performance is more worse than, for example, in English, where a lot of training data already exists. And yeah, there are like a lot of different aspects that play a role. For example, also like the general context matters. I think context is often key. I guess the most of you are familiar with, for example, using ChatGPT and to giving the system like some user prompts. And the more information you add in these prompts, the more or the better the answer will be. So if you extract as much information as you can get, which is also often like yeah, behind a lot of security restrictions and also legal restrictions, the better yeah, the end result can be.
Yeah. Martin, would you like to hop in as well?
Yeah, I'll try not to replicate too much of what has been said. I obviously agree with everything. Just trying to frame it a bit. So we see that like a lot of civil society organizations use AI to collect data in the first place. That's not our focus. Like what we don't struggle with collecting data. We use basically existing data sets kind of to train our algorithms. But what we're using it is to detect hate speech. Yeah. So to detect and assess the criminality of it. And in order to do that, one of the key limitations that we are facing is if assuming here a lot of experts in the audience who are looking at this tool, and it's like, I wonder how good that actually is or whether that's useful. That's the kind of feedback that's relevant for us. So that's the limitation that we're facing in terms of data availability, is feedback from people who could potentially actually use this. We don't need more hate speech data. We actually need a view of like, I actually think this is helpful or not, or this is fairly inaccurate. And if you're worried about it only being optimized or trained on German criminal code, it can fairly easily be adjusted to different sets of legal requirements. So the whole system is set up so that it can be customized to different legal authorities. Obviously, it needs to be improved in those settings again, because I guess talking about general limitations in terms of hate speech, just every jurisdiction has their own legal terms and legal requirements, and then interpretations of those, and then there are comments to the laws and all that. So the reality is quite difficult, and we'll obviously never be able to address 100% of the accuracy and accomplish all of that. But what we're hopefully able to do is support the people who are dealing with hate in making those determinations, writing the reports, and just facilitating their decision making, and that's our goal. And our bottleneck again is just like having people actual feedback from people who know their stuff, because at the moment it's us thinking, hey, this is a cool tool for people to potentially use, but we don't know whether it actually is.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting addition in that there are limitations both in use cases, but then also in, well, the difficulty developing tools that are fit for purpose for addressing hate speech or supporting professionals like we have in the room addressing hate speech. And actually, what I might want to do is just push you all a little further on some case studies from the tools that you're using. In that I know that Jordi and Adinda, you have some examples to talk about in your work using this, because I think the specific use cases really make more accessible what is otherwise quite broad concepts of agentic systems, or like dashboards collecting tens of thousands of pieces of content. So would love to drill down. And I think first I'll pass to maybe Adinda or Jordi if you want to elaborate a bit further, and then continue to explore the themes of strengths and limitations and how the tool supported you in discussing that.
You go first and then Jordi. So actually, I wanted to mention an example I did together with Jordi, because we used the EOOH dashboard to follow the Dutch elections last year in October. So maybe afterwards he can also add anything I've missed on that. So we used the EOOH dashboard basically to follow what were the online hate narratives during the campaign period leading up to the elections. And as I said before, that's super helpful with the dashboard, because on our own, with the time that we have on our hands and the amount of work we have, that would not have been possible. So with the data gathered, we were able to analyze and sort of map out what were the dominant online hate narratives. And well, it was actually quite obvious that whatever words we would use to follow the elections, even very neutral words like elections 2025, parliament in the Netherlands, or even a very neutral word you would assume as Dutch, would actually give us a lot of online hate, mostly against migrants and anti-Muslim hate. So that was a very easy conclusion with the use of the dashboard, that that is such a dominant narrative online, and then you also have the proof of it, because we know about that because we are online a lot, we follow a lot of discussions, but to have the data behind it with the actual numbers and even a timeline of showing peaks of when that was happening, that is very, very useful, especially for advocacy efforts. As a network, we obviously want to talk to governments, to the European Commission, and now with the DSA to digital services coordinators, but they always ask for proof. It is obviously not enough if we say that we have a feeling about it. So that kind of research is super helpful carrying out those advocacy efforts. Yeah, maybe to add to that, apart from the anti-Muslim hate and the anti-migrant hate, we also noticed a peak in the timeline when it came to anti-LGBT hate, exactly the day after the elections in the Netherlands, when it became apparent that probably our next prime minister will be the first gay prime minister of the Netherlands. And right away we saw a peak of online hate against the LGBT community. So it is definitely very helpful to have a tool like that showing us these hate narratives.
What's really important here is that it's data informed, right? We often, when it comes to advocacy, we say, okay, but this is a bad thing, and we all know it's a bad thing, but now we have the numbers to back that up. And what we saw in that research that Adinda just shared, that also a lot of the conversations were inauthentic. So it wasn't necessarily a matter of freedom of speech or freedom of expression. It was kind of organized influence. I'm not saying it was the Russians. We don't have proof for that, but we saw like political networks or people banding together to share these narratives. And it also involved a lot of AI-generated content with weird memes and weird videos that really show this dystopic future of the country, and then targeting specific political parties and political leaders. So we also, in that same research, set up channels for all the political leaders who were participating in the elections. And we did see that there was slightly more toxicity surrounding left-leaning parties compared to right-leaning parties. But overall, also more toxicity surrounding female party leaders. So it was quite interesting to see that mapped out with clear data to back that up. So that helps us with advocacy, but also with making arguments on why regulation is so important, right? It's not really a freedom of speech issue. It's just platforms being hijacked by bad actors.
Yeah, that's I think that's makes it really real and super interesting the way that you were able to exploit the insights in other ways. And then also, I think importantly, just to pick up on a thread you left there, communicate that in a language which carries credibility because it's backed with kind of a big data picture, and also, potentially in visualization formats as well, which you didn't mention, but I do know the EOOH dashboard does. Speaking of big data and visibility, I know Lara has done a lot of work on managing taking away the big data insights from that. So maybe I can ask her to speak to a case study from that before we go back to our guests from Neu-Ulm.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I wanted to share some insights on some in-depth research we have been conducting using the dashboard that I think it might be relevant for everybody. So the first one is like the last research actually we've published on anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. We wanted to investigate the extent to which Holocaust denial content is online and how the anti-Semitic narrative, and we wanted to track anti-Semitic narrative. And the dashboard has allowed us to analyze pretty big sample of over 3 million posts. And what we found is that first 20% of these 3 million posts were toxic, so they were hateful. And also that Twitter, for example, is very often the platform where the most high toxic content is prevalent. So we wanted to follow up and dig deeper a bit into the Holocaust denial. And what we found was a very shocking amount of violent language, almost 2/3 of the toxic language we found, for example, on the Holocaust denial was violent, and almost all of it, quite unsurprisingly, contained disinformation and conspiracy theories. So that's also like a proof that unfortunately such a content still remains on the platform while cause a huge amount of harm to Jewish community, and that's also like an example that such a content can be categorized into the category of awful but lawful. So platform doesn't really take this content down while it creates a lot of harms. So it also opens up a discussion, the legal framework on such content, and so that's something I wanted to share. And another research we were conducting was related to the Great Replacement theory, and we found, for example, that disinformation on such conspiracy theory is very much prevalent online, and also the dashboard allows us to find like viral posts that have been published and has a huge impact on the visibility because they have been published, for example, by pretty big influential figures, for example, Tommy Robinson, just to name one. And what I think the AI tool allowed us to do is to to see how this type of conspiracy theories also intersect with, for example, attacks to women's in the narrative that, for example, the birth rate decline has been basically weaponized and used as an argument to attack women, to give more children to the world, and also as an attack to migrants that are overruling the Western white population. So I think it's, without the dashboard, it would have been perhaps being hard to analyze and interpret this intersection of hate, I would say. So yeah, that's it from my side.
Great, thank you. Martin, if I could ask, I know we want to leave some time for question and answer, so I'm afraid if I could ask if you just take a minute or two to...
I'll be brief. Yeah, so I just outline kind of the topics that we're working on where we're using AI solutions to counter it. So what we're, for example, so I'll just list a few examples. So we're developing and evaluating a bot that spreads counter narratives to extremist content on Reddit. Then we're working on trying to build two simulations, LLM-based simulations of interacting with an extremist or with a child groomer. Both quite harsh contents, but the goal is to, with the extremist agent, is we found out that a lot of psychotherapists, for example, struggle in therapy to detect whether someone is an extremist or a conspiracy theorist or has a disease, and we know psychological disorders are a main predictor for radicalization or a main driver of radicalization. So we're trying to develop a tool that helps therapists basically practice these interactions with extremists and engaging with those narratives. And same with the grooming bot, prospectively trying to help children interact with fend off grooming bots and detecting those patterns. So those are just a few of the examples that we're working on, and happy to go on.
That's super fascinating. I think that is great food for thought for the questions that participants can pose. So please continue to pose them if anyone wants to. We already have a good number, I'm happy to say. And I think what I'll do is I'll just throw some in, and anyone who wants to can jump in on them. One of the questions, the first question is, how can we mitigate, account for, or critically reflect bias when creating and applying AI tooling? I think all of you could really validly speak to that. So please, anyone who wants to jump in.
So I can speak from the EOOH perspective, and that is quite a fundamental rule. Don't trust systems blindly. So the way our dashboard is set up is that it's with a human in the loop. So there is an individual who's labeling content, and then that's checked by another individual. And then only then we say, okay, this is a valid assumption that this is toxic language, right? And then, of course, the AI system is trained on it. But we want to have a human in the loop. So we don't want to use black boxes where you put something in and you get an end result, but you don't know why. So the EOOH platform uses explainable AI. We always know the reason why it's showed or labeled as we see it in the dashboard. So my suggestion would be is look for tools that have the same fundament, the same approach, because otherwise you can't ever check if there's a bias or not.
I can add something very quickly. I think another important things to mention that the baselines that the dashboard creates in that groups different type of hates. As I mentioned before, anti-Semitism is one, anti-Muslim and sexism. What we try to do is to as the keyword that constitute these baselines are neutral. So, for example, for for sexisms, the narratives, the entry points are, for example, women, men, or for example, for anti-Semitism is Jewish, Jew. So the idea is that by entering these neutral keywords, the sample will be less biased.
Yeah,
And then,
I would agree with what Jordi and Laura said, that obviously there's always a human looking into the data as well. So in that sense, there's always that check. And also with the development of the tool, I mean, we are building the Dutch version of the hub, but we do it together with the technical partner. We give them the words where to look for the data. So in that sense, it's also together. It's not just that they hand us a tool and then we just have to go ahead and use it. It really is a matter of cooperation as well.
yeah, and what I was going to add is one of the things that Niels particularly taking care of in his work, for example, is making sure to emphasize that it's a human in the loop process as well. So we're not trying to make a determination we're just offering we're aiming to offer an assessment together with an explanation, and not the determination necessarily is the key contribution, but the line of argument and the explanation that the agents provide, so that people who make that assessment can use it to inform their decision making. So that's one of the things. And then in terms of the detection, I think for us, it's a lot also of an academic challenge is bias in AI algorithms. So there's a huge line of research in hate speech detection that only addresses biases, and it just emphasizes. It doesn't say that, to me, that doesn't necessarily instill confidence in it, because it shows it's so hard to tackle. But there's constant progress in that realm. And biases come from all sorts of areas. So it's the availability of data or the prevalence in the data, and then also the way in which the algorithms are obviously trained to make their decisions. And in that, we've made some progress by developing some detection algorithms ourselves, where we're trying to, through computational means, assess the bias in the algorithms and stuff. But yeah, it's a constant struggle, and people are constantly trying to optimize for reducing the bias in it. And every 3 months, there's a new paper that manages to reduce bias by this much. And so the overall prediction accuracy goes up from 86.7 to 86.78. And then someone can write their PhD about this. And so it incrementally keeps, but it's a process.
Yeah.
What I would also would add to this discussion and the bias point. So I would say there's no one solution fits it. There's no one system fits it all solution. So there was a pretty recently published study where different annotators from different countries perceived different content not the same as being hateful. So there's also a big cultural context between who's perceiving or who's using the system. So that's also something that should be considered.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that addition. I think I'd actually have a question that might come right back, which is one of the participants posed, what can we do about underreporting of hate crime with presumably using the tools that we have? And I know that the tool that you demonstrated to us earlier, Niels, and the functionality of the EOOH dashboard could at least speak to those. Would also be curious if there's any mechanisms to report bots from the tools that Adinda, you mentioned, INACH has. So yeah, maybe I'll just pass first back to you, Niels.
Sure. So I would say in Germany we do have a pretty convenient position compared maybe to other countries, because in terms of assessing hateful content, we do have already existing NGOs that are tackling this issue, where you can report content that is clearly illegal or clearly hateful online, to start a whole prosecution process. And I know like that in other countries those systems do not exist in that way. Yeah, so that's our perspective.
Yeah, and I'd say the tool you built itself in as it iterates will help support that because it'll help understand the legal reasoning and or at least the considerations of what might be worth a report under the DSA or the German criminal code, for instance. So thank you for both demonstrating that earlier and your reflection now. But yeah, maybe I pass to Laura or Jordi about how it works in the EOOH dashboard, how that might support underreporting of hate speech.
So I think AI is a pretty nice solution here because you can do it at scale, right? When it comes to reporting hate speech, specifically on social media, often that responsibility is put on the victim, and I don't think that's very fair. So if we get AI tools in place that look for this stuff, and then I don't think we should do automated reporting. I wouldn't trust the systems myself, but if you can then show that data to a monitoring organization or an organization that's responsible for following up, then it's not responsibility of the victim anymore. And I think that's something we should aim for.
Maybe I can add something. I'm not sure because this is definitely a huge issue and a worry of us as well. So I'm not sure if I have a solution to it. But obviously, the dashboard does help. It keeps track of whether something is removed or not after you've reported it. So in that sense, it is helpful. It does take over some of the work of people who report, because we report a lot during the monitoring exercise. And the big problem of reporting is not only that we don't have enough people to do it and to report it, but also that the systems to report are very inaccessible and have a lot of flaws as well. Because there are ways that you can, for example, report a lot of URLs at the same time. So that would save me as a reporter time, but that in practice, it doesn't go that way because then you don't receive feedback on one of them, but on all of them. And then I don't know about which one the platform is talking about. So underreporting in general is a huge issue because of bots, because of generative AI, because we do see that also as a user, you can repeat a lot of the same messages very easily with very cheap technology. So it definitely is a huge issue. It's also a huge issue in the sense that with the DSA and the limited amount of trusted flaggers that we have now, there are less eyes actually on the content than before. We obviously hope that this is the transitional phase of the DSA and that will improve. But there are a lot of problems around this one problem of underreporting.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful to feed in there. Also, how it works, because we can have solutions that help people in collating content and judging content, but then there's also systems to plug into. And I think the points earlier made about helping people every step of the way, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution, were important points that were made. We are reaching the end of our time together. So with that, I'd thank all the panelists for joining us.